and welcome to the JCPS series on secondary school multi-tiered systems of support for behavior. This module is focused on the concept and process of screening, and we'll see how the school-wide behavior team uses information from behavior screeners. In later modules, we'll discuss the steps teams take once students have been identified, the essential components of effective interventions for behavior, and formative assessment. Screeners are assessments that look broadly across all students to identify those who are at greater risk of falling behind their peers and needing additional supports to be successful. Screeners generally identify students as low risk, moderate risk, or high risk. This indicates the level of concern or severity of the risk of the students falling behind their peers. One common criticism of screening is an opposition to labeling students as at risk. Some have suggested that at risk is another way of creating disproportionality. However, it's important to note here that the term at risk does not mean that there is necessarily anything wrong with the student. Rather, it's meant only to designate that the circumstances surrounding the student, things like assessment scores, teacher reports, or other data and information, create a concern for potential failure. But identifying students whose circumstances put them at risk is necessary in order to look deeper at what the issues may be and how we may intervene. For example, the data is clear that black male students are suspended far more often than their white peers, even though direct observations have demonstrated that their behaviors are no different. This means that the school environment, as it has been structured, puts black males at risk of suspension. Our job as educators is to mitigate the risk and put structures in place to support students and families, no matter their race, no matter their circumstances. Another common concern with universal screening, which refers to our plans to screen every student in the school, is that it can feel like it is too burdensome. There's no way to get around the fact that screening takes time, but there is a cost-benefit consideration here. The time and effort it takes to screen pales in comparison to the time and heartache that can be prevented through proactive intervention. Because we wish to screen every student in the school, our screening methods and processes must be simple. Of course, with simplicity, we lose some precision, but the ability to get some basic measures on every student is our priority. Fortunately, JCPS screeners have been nationally normed, providing useful information from fairly simple assessments. In JCPS, behavior screening is done using the Student Risk Screening Scale, or SRSS screener. At the secondary level, the SRSS is completed by all teachers for each student in a designated period. For example, all teachers will complete the screener for their second period class. Student behaviors are rated for frequency on a 4-point scale across 12 behavioral descriptors, including externalizing behaviors such as peer rejection and internalizing behaviors like nervous or fearful. The school-wide behavior team identifies students using cut scores, meaning that students scoring above a certain level are deemed to be at low, moderate, or high risk. Because the SRSS is based on national norms, the cut scores can change year to year, and you'll need to consult the current SRSS information. Like the SRSS, the SABRS is completed by all teachers in the school. Using a 4-point scale on 19 items, teachers rate the frequency from never to always of each student's behaviors, but just focusing on the last month. Importantly, teachers are not to be provided with definitions of the listed behaviors. Thus, with terms like temper outburst, teachers are asked to use their best judgment in considering what actions are representative of each behavior. The idea behind this is that teachers should be considering their interpretations of student misbehavior rather than trying to determine whether what they've observed fits some specific definition. The SABRS provides 4 subscales of risk for a total behavior risk score, as well as subscales for social, academic, and emotional risk. As with the SRSS, the SABRS cut scores are based on national norms which can change over time, so you'll need to consult the current SABRS information. While the SRSS and SABRS are useful in identifying behavioral and social emotional risk, This data alone should only be considered the first level of screening. Using a prevention logic, false positives are preferable to false negatives, and many of the students identified at this level will not require further intervention. To make this determination, however, these students will require further attention and assessment, as will be described in Module 3 of this series. Universal screening is just one of the tasks undertaken by the team. JCPS school-wide behavior teams meet regularly and typically look at their screening data at least 3 times per year. The logic and administration of screeners is fairly simple and straightforward, and while these processes involve the entire school, they often are overseen by the behavior team. Once the screening is completed, the team meets to discuss the results. We can think of this as a second level of universal screening, where team members look at data and discuss individual students. This is a high school, school-wide behavior team. As you're introduced to the team members and their discussions, you'll notice that they are not all experts in screening and assessment. Rather, the team is composed of individuals that broadly represent all adults in the school, an administrator, a behavior coach, content area representation of teachers, a counselor, a school psychologist, a mental health professional, and any others who can offer broad perspectives about students identified as at risk. Other individuals may be consulted as appropriate to discuss individual students, even possibly the student's guardian. Each school-wide behavior team has a designated lead, whose job it is to lead these meetings according to an agenda and make sure that all necessary tasks have been completed. While there's not a mandated agenda or form for schools to use in discussing universal screening, it is recommended that the following general steps be used to structure meetings that involve universal screening. Remind everyone of the decision rules for the screener. Call attention to data and cut scores or risk level. Sort and filter data to highlight cut scores or risk level. This can usually be done on a computer for all to see. Highlight students identified as surpassing cut score or risk level. Solicit additional information among team members regarding identified students. See if someone has more specific knowledge. And discuss each of these students individually. This will be the topic of Module 3.
Okay, let's get started for today. Thank you for being here. So today we are going to look at the SRSS screening data.
So are we going to look at all of the data or just the students who are at risk?
Now we're going to take a look at all the data and we're going to sort through it together as a team. To think through this logically, I think the first step thing that we need to do is for everybody just to go ahead and pull up the data. You should have that on your computers.
Well, of course, I already knew what the data was. I already knew what the conclusions were. But I really feel like as a team lead, it's important for everybody to have buy-in and understand how the process works. So we really need to look at it together as a team. And, I'm only one person. I can make mistakes. So having, other perspectives is always the best way to look at data. A lot of times teams come in and they'll have a certain idea of what they think the problem is. But when we really start looking at the data, it gives them a true understanding of what the problem is. It's not just the things that they think it is, it's other things. So it's really important for everybody just to be able to really look and dive into that data.
Watch how the team members have an opportunity to express their thoughts on each case.
It just feels like we're putting a lot of emphasis on the ratings of one person. But what if that teacher's wrong?
I thought the same thing, but it's only one data point, and that's why we're meeting here today, right? Is to talk about all the information?
Exactly. We'll take a look at the students that have been identified, but then we're going to take a deeper look.
And I have a related question on that. We have a lot of students that are close to the cut score, and so should we be concerned about those students since they really didn't make the criteria?
Yeah, it's my understanding that the cut scores are set so that it's more likely to be a false positive than a false negative. And that way, it's better to focus on students who may not need the support, and so we don't miss students who do need the supports.
Exactly. When we're looking at all this, remember, this is only one data point that we're looking at. We're going to be looking at multiple data points to figure out if we have students who have any other needs or additional risks.
I'm concerned that we have a lot of students with needs in our school, and we really don't have a lot of ways to identify all the needs of the students, and so if we can't identify them, I'm afraid we won't give them the supports that they need. So it makes me feel better and it comforts me knowing that we have data that helps identify the students that are on the margin?
You know, it just concerns me. I didn't want one source, the screener, to be something that dictates if one of our, if our students get interventions or not. But now that I understand truly that a universal screener is really just to help us identify students who need that extra assistance to help move them forward, I feel very strongly about using them, along with other data points, so we can help students be successful.
The team lead keeps the discussion on topic, but there should be equal input from all team members. Watch how interactive this process can be when done correctly.
Okay, so who else has a student they'd like to talk about today?
I think we need to talk about Sam,
I
don't
was
you?
just gonna say that. Yeah, I'm really concerned. I'm noticing some things. He's late to school a lot. His attendance, a lot of tardies, absent often. He's not doing he's not doing any work. I also noticed when he comes in, he's always angry or upset, and he just comes in, he'll lay his head down, and I've struggled to really build that relationship with him.
And besides that, he's like 2 grade levels below on his reading scores and his math. He's like a grade level below on his math.
I have him in the afternoon, so he usually does come in. I guess he's late because you miss him in the mornings. But in the afternoon, I have him, but he's tired all the time. Bless his heart. He's like always tries to have his head down, and I'll have to like ask him to get up, take a walk, get some water, and all that. He's friendly. Like we can have conversations, and he'll do what I ask him to do. But he is worn out.
So we need to concentrate maybe on the morning, so do we know why he comes in late all the time?
I was going to ask, has anyone had any contact with his family?
I was gonna say, I've tried to call, I haven't been able to reach anybody, so I'm struggling. Have you been able to reach anybody?
Well, some of his friends were saying that he started a new job, so he's been working after school.
So does he have any referrals or suspensions or anything like that?
I haven't written any referrals for him.
I know with the tardies, we've had to, I know they've had to, write the referral for that, just because they've built, and we've tried to put things in place to help him. And I know he's talked to the AP multiple times.
So are your biggest concerns are the tardy and the fact that he is definitely behind where he should be with his academics
Grades,
as
yes,
well?
yes.
Well, with me, academically, like I have him for science, I don't have him for reading or math, but he can read the science and he seems to understand it. So I feel like if he were to get a little extra help, maybe we could get him into some tutoring, get some kind of intervention for him, that he could make it. He'd be okay.
Well, does he have reading and math in the early morning?
No, that's later. I think that's on B day, with another teacher.
And you've already put some interventions in place in the classroom for him?
Yes.
And they just don't seem to be helping?
No.
Okay. So maybe are we in agreement that we should go ahead and refer him to the SIT team so that they can take a deeper look in and decide, what kind of intervention might work well?
Yeah, I mean, do you feel like you have a relationship with him where you could try to pull him and meet with him one-on-one? Because when I try to do that, he just shuts down. But do you feel like you've built that relationship with him that
Yeah,
he would
I think
open
I
up
could
to
do
you?
that.
Okay. And maybe try to come up with a plan?
All right, so I'm going to add his name to the list.
I think it's important to make sure that we have Tier 1 systems in place before we refer students to Tier 2. If the Tier 1 systems are not in place, Tier 2 systems are not going to be that effective.
I'm always concerned about the whole child and not just the data. I think we need to look at what's happening at home, maybe what's happening in the community. Does the student have friends? So we want to identify not just what the student is doing at school, but maybe what's causing what the student is doing at school.
To recap, universal screening for behavior involves gathering information from adults in the school to help identify those students who may be at risk. The only purpose of screening is to identify students who may benefit from additional support. It is not meant to stigmatize anyone, and no labeling is involved. But the school-wide behavior team has to identify concerns in order to address them, and screening is a first step. Once students are identified through screeners or other data, further assessment and intervention are typically provided by secondary behavior teams.